Well, do I feel like a proud parent today? I was just standing over there remembering my first conference and remembering that, for those of you who were there as well, over at the UU Church in West Hartford, probably had somewhere around 200 attendees. Moving from there, we went to Windsor High School, which was a good venue. We grew into it. They were supportive. We did well there. We had between 300 and 400, I think, at the most. Today, I have to say we have over 600 people here registered, and I'm very, very proud of that. It really is a very clear demonstration of how strong this movement is right now and how interested you all are in learning more about the progression of organic farming and sourcing organic food for yourselves, and that's really a wonderful thing. So at this point, I'd like to just very quickly introduce the Board of Directors, myself, James Roby, our Vice President, Elizabeth Fleming, our Treasurer, Ron Capozzi, our Secretary, Chris Killifer, the Chair of the Development Committee, Janet Heller, our Product and Service Committee Chair, Betty Lusandi, Jane Marr, who is also on the Product and Service Committee, Kim Stoner, who is our former Vice President and on the Organic Land Care Committee, and our new members, Bernard Brennan, John Tureen, and Mary Dale DeBoer. So round of applause for all of them and the support. So I'm going to try to be brief here and get right on to our wonderful keynote here today. On December 16th in 1773, 150 colonists, there were 3 parties of 50 men each, dressed up as Indians and went down to Boston Harbor and busted open a bunch of crates of tea and pitched it into the harbor. One of those 150 men was my great-great-great-grandfather, Captain Joseph Roby. I like to think for a second that he's looking down on me right now, being somewhat of a leader of this group and trying to direct this to the best of my ability. It's interesting to note that the cause that these colonists were fighting, or the cause that these colonists were trying to illustrate in this symbol that's been carried on for the hundreds of years, was that they were directly opposing a monopoly on tea by the East India Company. And it's very interesting how at that time 2 million cups of tea were consumed by the colonists. Today, 6 million hamburgers are consumed a day in this country. Those hamburgers are produced by one outlet, by the way. And that's pretty close to a monopoly as well. So I'm not asking you tomorrow to go out and smash open crates of hamburgers and throw them into the nearby harbor. Nothing quite that radical. But I am asking you to fight the fight. And this isn't anything that we need to start right now. This is just something that we need to continue doing. Because it's happening right now. The movement has grown, and as I was talking with Michael earlier, the movement has grown all the way around the world. So it's not a fight that's fought with bullets or hard words or anything like that. It's very simple. It's a fight that's fought with dollars, and it's a fight that's fought with community and the assets that you have in your community and your friends and your family. So I encourage you through this conference today to go and learn from our workshops, to network with your peers, share the information that you've learned on your own, and learn other ways to do things better from the people that are here today. And take that as a seed and plant it with your friends and family, and this will continue to grow in the years to come. So now I'd like to introduce our keynote, economist attorney, and author. He is Vice President for Enterprise Development, previously the Director for the Institute of Policy Studies, and he is also the co-founder of the Business Alliance for Local Living Economies. Please, a warm welcome from everybody, Michael Shuman. Thank you.
Well, this is quite an assembly of people here. It's extremely impressive. I have to tell you that when I first published a book on local economy in 1998 called Going Local, the first group that came together was at the University of Kentucky, and 2 people showed up for it, 1 left early. So it's really, I mean, it's an extraordinary testament to how far we've come in all of this. Just excuse me for 1 second here. So I titled the talk for this afternoon, Community Food Enterprises, the Stimulus Not Taken, because I do believe that what we are doing is not only good for public health and the land, but in fact, it's essential for the economy. Now, it's peculiar that I should wind up being an advocate for local food because, and this is a bit of a kind of true confession, that my first jobs in moments of desperation, in high school I worked for Jack in the Box for 2 years, and then in college, in a moment of absolute destitute situation, I agreed to work for IT&T and promote Twinkies. And I had to actually dress up like a gigantic Twinkie with yellow tights, and in fact, I looked a little bit like that. So I had to walk up and down the frozen food section saying, "Do you know that Twinkies are now individually wrapped for freshness?" That I should be Connecticut NOFA's spokesperson for local food shows how far I think anyone can come. Now, if you want to think about local food as an economic development driver, there's probably no better place to begin than Hardwick, Vermont. And some of you may know that there's a book that's just being published this month called The Town That Food Saved. There's a shorter version of this story written up by Marion Burroughs in the New York Times about a year ago, and she describes this town of about 4,000 people that decided if we want to be wealthy, we are going to have to be self-reliant in something. Why not food? Let's make ourselves one of the great local food centers of New England. So the farmers worked with one another to move into organic growing. A bunch of them started to do value-added industries. The Vermont Soy Company, Jasper Hill Farms did advanced cheese preparation in its caves. Pete's Green is a giant CSA involving many, many different farms. High Mowing Organic Seeds has developed a good high-end seed operation. Cutting-edge restaurants, food business incubators. In all, this 4,000-person town, in the last 2 years, when most of us have been shedding jobs, created 100 new jobs. 100 new jobs in a 4,000-person town. I believe the key to that kind of economic development is local food. Now, it's important that we distinguish what local food isn't, because no doubt sooner or later Ronald McDonald will be serving local burgers, and we're going to be a little skeptical of that. Because at the end of the day, local has to be understood as 2 elements, and both are necessary. The first is, yes, proximity from the farm to the plate, but the other is also local ownership. Ownership matters, and I'll explain why in a moment. ownership can come in many different forms. I mean, we don't have to be overly demanding about this, but it certainly means you're not a publicly traded company like McDonald's or Walmart. Perhaps you can be a small local or regional chain. That might suffice. You could be one local business here, a retailer relating to a local farmer somewhere else if there's something that you couldn't produce locally. You could also be a larger producer cooperative if, like Organic Valley, you're owned by more than 1,000 farmers spread around the country. So I think we can, take a fairly broad definition of local. From that definition, I want to cover 3 points that I think are useful in thinking about how we move this food revolution forward. The first is why local food matters. The second is, can local food compete, and how are what many of us are now calling community food enterprises become more competitive? And then finally, how can this local food revolution be accelerated? I'm going to have a half dozen suggestions here. So let's start for why local food matters. First and foremost, local food is about economic development. I don't know how many of you have been to Detroit in the last decade or so. Detroit is a city that was built for 2 million people. Today it has fewer than 1 million people living there. Vast tracts of abandoned land and buildings. But one of the remarkable things that has happened is that people have taken over land to grow food for themselves. They don't own the land, they've just taken it over. And they've allowed their animals to start roaming the streets. So Detroit is coming alive as a new agricultural center. Now, what I was interested in, and a group I worked with, then the Fair Food Foundation was interested in, is what was the economic development potential of this? And we calculated that if Detroiters shifted their consumption 20% to Detroit-grown food, we could create 5,000 jobs. If the 5 counties surrounding Detroit, in an act of regional solidarity, shifted 20% of their consumption to Detroit-grown, this could create 36,000 jobs. This would be the most important economic development activity ever to happen to the Motor City. In the meantime, national policymakers are 100% focused on the moribund auto industry, and local decision makers are focused on their favorite form of economic development, which is casinos. This is absolutely nutty. Here's another study that we're just releasing this week. This is a study I did with Bioneers, looking at the impact of 25% food localization in New Mexico. This would create 10,000 jobs, basically giving a job to 1 out of 4 people unemployed in New Mexico right now, and would generate $1.5 billion of new output for the state. There are 2 reasons why local food is important for economic development. The first is that local businesses